We're flipping the script and talking about how Raheem Morris may have uniquely forged the path for Michael Penix's success here in Atlanta.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Falcons podcast, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play. So guys, if you don't know me, I'm your very humble host, Aaron Freeman, aka Mr. Drew. Right? Mr. Sirius Black, Mr. Iron that sharpens the iron, Mr. Jolly Green Giant, and of course, Mr. AKA proud host of this illustrious podcast. Been covering the Falcons for too many years, formerly at FalFans.com RIP. And I thank each and every one of you that is an everydayer of this podcast that makes it your first listen or first watch of each and every day. And all you got to do to become an everydayer, subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. So today we are kind of flipping the script, right? Literally and figuratively. Yesterday we talked about all the reasons behind why the skepticism is warranted with this Michael Penix selection. Today we're going to talk about why Penix could be successful, right? Despite all that skepticism, right? And the root cause of why we were skeptical yesterday was because of the unprecedented nature of selecting a quarterback in the top 10 over the last 25 years. It's never been done before, right? Taking a quarterback in the top 10 with the expectation that he's going to sit more than one season. And on yesterday's, I gave 6 examples of teams that drafted a quarterback that high inside them, including the Falcons when they drafted Michael Vick. I forgot one example, the 7th example, Carson Palmer. That's my bad, right? Who they drafted when John Kitna was in the final year of his contract back in 2003. Carson Palmer did sit his rookie season and then, became the starter in year 2. Kitna was re-signed as Palmer's backup for the next couple of years. But, even though this has never been done before, that potentially means, Terry and Raheem are innovators, pioneers, icons, right? Talked about, are they the smartest guys in the room? We were skeptical in yesterday's episode, but maybe today we're talking about why they could be the smartest guys in the room, why they could be 5 years ahead of other people that, 5 years from now, people are going to be looking back at this move of selecting Michael Penix and saying, oh, it worked for the Falcons. Maybe it can work for us. And so the question is, how does it work for the Falcons? And, we just got to go out to where Raheem used to work in LA, Hollywood, right? Where we just got to get the script writers together and come up with the script for, if we're making the movie, we'll call it Rise Up or whatever it is. All right. We'll have Don Cheadle play Raheem in that movie. We'll have Common play Terry Fontenot in that movie. Maybe Bobby De Niro or Dustin Hoffman will play Arthur Blank in that movie, right? How would this play out on the big screen? Well, the Falcons would go out there and win for these next 2 years under Kirk Cousins, which we discussed all the reasons why we're skeptical of whether they can do that on yesterday's episode. But we will say on today's episode that they absolutely are a playoff team this year and next year for the next 2 years under Kirk Cousins. And Kirk plays well enough that no one spends the next 2 years really calling for his job, although it is something that's buzzing in the back of people's minds every time the Falcons lose. And we see everything is well and good in the regular season for Kirk, but things get a little hairy in the postseason, right? The whole Kirk can't win playoff games, things rears its ugly head both in 2024 and 2025, especially in 2025 when it's that all-in season where, after building off of the playoff success in 2024, 2025, you're like, we're a Super Bowl contender. We're all in, right? This may be the last year of Kirk. So we're all in. And then Kirk ultimately, throws that game back-breaking interception in the second round of the playoffs or whatever it is. And we're sitting here going into 2026. Yeah, as good as Kirk was these last 2 years, and he definitely helped raise the floor for this football team, there was absolutely room for an upgrade because we need a guy that can take us to that next level, right? We've already established ourselves as a perennial playoff team under Kirk Cousins. And Penix is the guy that can take us to being a Super Bowl contender. Again, this is the Hollywood script, right? And then that first year in 2026 under Michael Penix, he balls out, right? And the ideal version of this script, right? he wins an MVP or something like that. But even short of that, he plays well. And after Kirk has raised that floor, Penix raises that ceiling, and he's going to be that guy that's going to make the big time throws and make the big time plays that can win you games in January and go toe to toe with whoever the juggernaut of the NFC is. Let's say for script purposes, Caleb Williams, right? And the Chicago Bears and all that stuff, right? And Penix does that. And, the movie doesn't end with the Falcons winning a Super Bowl, right? The movie ends fade to black. The Falcons have to beat the Bears or whoever their biggest rival is. So whoever bounced them out of the playoffs the 2 previous years, right? They beat that team in the NFC Championship game in Penix's first year, and that leads them to the Super Bowl. And then the movie fades to black. And then, they show you the updates, the real people played by the actors. And you have Don Cheadle out there and Common and whoever's playing Michael Penix, some young Hollywood star, right? Bobby De Niro, Dustin Hoffman, whoever's playing Arthur Blank, and it's just a still shot of them holding a Lombardi trophy. And then, the line reads, when in whatever year the Falcons went on to win a Super Bowl with Michael Penix and all that stuff. Right. And suddenly the Penix plan becomes something that other teams are going to start innovating. And right, like this is, like Moneyball, right? They made a movie about that, right? Like, you know what I'm saying? And we're sitting here talking about Raheem and Terry being these innovators and these icons, that they were the smartest guys in the room. But I think part of the reason, if they do become that in this Hollywood version of this, and again, your mileage may vary on how realistic this Hollywood script is, right? And they're making a movie about the Falcons, and it's not talking about the Falcons being this inept, Cleveland Indians-esque major league franchise or something like that, or the Cleveland Browns with draft day, right? They only make movies about the underdogs, right? But the Falcons would be an underdogs. But part of the reason why this innovation could occur is because Raheem Morris may have constructed a unique coaching staff that might be able to put it all together and put Penix on this path to success. And we'll talk about that as we continue today's Locked On Falcons. So dark times may be here for the Atlanta Falcons, questions about the future, but you're going to need your friends more than ever now. And Monopoly Go is going to allow you to team up with your friends for time tournaments, where you work together to build up each other's boards. And the more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock, like unique stickers that you can trade with your friends to complete albums for bigger prizes, cool new playing pieces, hilarious emojis for taunting your friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges to include their own unique mini games, like digging for treasure or a robot pachinko machine. And there's new timed events to help you win big, like massive multipliers from everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So go get off the bench and go download it now for free on the Google Play or the App Store. Game on. So before we continue this conversation about Raheem Morris and how he can properly develop Michael Penix, I want to plug the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 stream here on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, where you're getting all the local content experts teas from the Locked On Podcast Network that they can only provide on all the sports, all the biggest stories daily. Again, on YouTube or your free Amazon Fire TV channels app. It's part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So when we talk about, the future and all this stuff, everything always becomes clear in hindsight. Like we can look back a couple of months to certain statements made about the Atlanta Falcons quarterback plans. And, Daniel Jeremiah talked about this, I think in February, shortly after the Falcons hired Raheem Morris, that, the people he talked to indicated that the Falcons were going young at the quarterback position. Then they signed Kirk Cousins and everybody's like, oh, that didn't mean anything. Well, it did, right? Looking back at it. And I remember when Raheem Morris put his coaching staff together, it was like, this is intriguing coaching staff, because if your plan was to draft and develop a young quarterback, like this feels like the type of staff that you would put together, given how many assistants that they have that have QB coaching experience, right? We touched upon this a little bit with Jordan Rodriguez, who covers the Rams for The Athletic, and she talked about how Falcons offensive coordinator, Zach Robinson, in the past as the Rams quarterbacks coach, right? He wasn't working on a daily basis with Matthew Stafford, right? That was Sean McVay and the people that were the offensive coordinators there's job on a daily basis. Instead, Robinson was doing a lot of work with the backup quarterbacks, namely Baker Mayfield and Carson Wentz these past 2 years, right? And we wonder if the Falcons have kind of ported over that same structure, right? They have potentially 3 coaches in that QB room, right? Robinson, of course, is the offensive play caller. He'll certainly be working with Kirk Cousins every day for the foreseeable future. You have TJ Yates, the quarterback's coach, right? Now, maybe he's instead of, I'm sure he'll be working with Kirk, obviously, but maybe he'll also be spending some time like Zach Robinson working with the backup quarterback, which may be his former teammate in Houston, Taylor Heinicke. Right now, I know a lot of people are assuming, oh, Heinicke's as good as gone. I'm not as convinced of that. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But then you actually had the third QB coach, the assistant quarterback coach, DJ Williams, son of Doug Williams, right? And he may be the one that's working with Michael Penix on a daily basis to get him ready as that third stringer. And then you have 4 other assistants on the Falcons coaching staff, assembled by Raheem, that have experience coaching quarterbacks either in the pros or college, right? First and foremost among them is Ken Zampese, the senior offensive assistant. He's coached quarterbacks in the NFL, many of them. He's been a play caller in the NFL. Some of the quarterbacks he's coached: Carson Palmer and Andy Dalton, Cincinnati; Baker Mayfield in Cleveland; Taylor Heinicke, Carson Wentz, and Alex Smith in Washington the past couple of years. And of course, we can't forget the legendary stint from Atlanta Legends' own Georgia legend Aaron Murray in that shortened AAF season in 2019. Then you also have offensive assistants like KJ Black and Patrick Kramer, who coached quarterbacks at the collegiate level as well on this staff. Black also played quarterback in college, and passing game specialist Chandler Whitman also played quarterback in college, has also coached quarterbacks at the pro and college levels. So the Falcons have this relatively unique structure where they can kind of silo or compartmentalize 2 or 3 quarterbacks that are in the building, where they could potentially have a dedicated position coach for each one of those guys that they work with daily. And when we apply that to Penix in particular, I think that could be potentially great for him, because as we sit here today, my biggest question about Michael Penix is his mechanics and his footwork. I think that needs to be reworked and improved if he's going to reach his potential in the NFL. And I think with 2 years of limited pressure to play, right, with Kirk Cousins as the starter, the Falcons could put in the work to rework those things and fix those problems, right? And that's where some of the Jordan Love, Aaron Rodgers parallels may come in a little bit more so than, why they drafted him and all that stuff, right? Because one of the things by many accounts was, Aaron Rodgers, when he spent those 3 years working behind Brett Favre, 100 years ago, seems forever ago, that one of the things he did was rework his mechanics to become a better passer in the league. And the same thing was true for Jordan Love. And I think a lot of that had to do with their quarterback coach, Tom Clement, who worked with both of those guys during that time. But you have all these former quarterbacks in the building that theoretically, these guys should know how to sort of solve some of these mechanical issues, right? And because he's going to sit for multiple years, you have a potentially, in theory, right? In theory, whatever you rework from the mechanics, from the footwork standpoint, could actually stick, because you're not going to deal with that issue that often comes up when teams and coaches and whatnot are reworking these things, and the tendency to revert back to old muscle memory, the way that you've thrown it, the way that you put your feet and your arm and all that stuff when you're under fire in the actual games, right? Now, basically the idea is Penix has 2 years to develop new muscle memory. So we can sit here and be hopeful today that that's going to be the case, right? And, we'll see how it plays out. But, let's briefly talk about, the Zach Robinson of it all in this path to success with Michael Penix, right? Maybe he's the next Kevin O'Connell. Maybe he's the next Zach Taylor, the next guy in that Sean McVay coaching tree that goes on to be a very successful head coach, right? And let's say that happens because of Kirk's success over the next 2 years in this hypothetical scenario that we're talking about. That happens in the next 2 years. So when Penix is ready to play in 2026, Zach Robinson's gone, and the Falcons are going to have a brand new offensive coordinator. Well, of course, they have so many internal candidates with all these different quarterback coaches, right, that could be promoted to that job. And, Raheem has done a good job, in theory, at least, to sort of stack his roster with any of these guys that over the next 2 years could develop into, whether it's TJ Yates, whether it's KJ Black, whether it's, Ken Zampese, right? And maybe that could be DJ Williams, right? Where, he spends the next 2 years working exclusively or primarily with Michael Penix, and maybe he's the guy that, can be trusted in Penix's ear calling the plays. Or maybe it's somebody else that's a play caller. And because Williams has been working exclusive, then he's the right guy to be the new quarterback coach. Or again, maybe it's TJ Yates, or maybe Zach Robinson goes to be him a head coach and TJ Yates goes to be his OC. And then, it's somebody else that's the play caller and DJ Williams, the quarterback coach. Again, any combination that you could come up with. And so this is where Terry and Raheem can be kind of innovators and icons, right? 3 to 5 years from now, teams can be looking at this coaching structure that the Falcons have built and saying, let's build our coaching staff in a similar way. This is the proper way to develop a quarterback. Right? He could, Raheem is the new template. He's the new guy that everybody looks at and like, you got to build a coaching staff like him. Like, he learned from the best in Sean McVay, and now he's become the best. Right? And now more teams are willing to take a top 10 pick and sit that guy for multiple seasons. Right? And then you put multiple guys in the quarterback room that can work with each one of the guys or whoever. Right? That may be the new template for success. But, before they get credit for being these innovative people, it's simply got to work. The proof is in the pudding, as they say, right? And that's where we're going to get into the burden that Raheem Morris has put on himself to wrap up today's episode by trying to be this sort of pioneer and innovator as we wrap up today's Locked On Falcons. So it is playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball season is in full swing, and FanDuel is the place to go if you're looking to bet on every game right now. New customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. And you can bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. And of course, now that the NFL draft is over, I know you guys are turning your attention to future props, right? Someone made bank betting on Michael Penix at 8. Right, over at FanDuel, and now you can potentially make bank betting on the Falcons to make the playoffs or not make the playoffs or whatever teams you think are going to win the divisions and all that stuff. Over unders for win totals. It's all there for you at FanDuel. What are you waiting for? Go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to make your first bet an automatic win. Again, that's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. So, guys, I want to plug the Locked On Falcons podcast, right? Make sure you subscribe. I think last I checked, we were like 25 people away from getting to 10,000 subscribers. Right? We didn't get there before the draft, but let's try to get there before May 1st. Right? We got like one more day, as many of you are listening. So if you haven't subscribed to Locked On Falcons, please hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, all you want. So, when we talk about Raheem and being this innovator and icon, and hopefully, now that we've had this conversation about Penix's path to success, whether you find yourself in the hopeful camp or the optimistic camp or the pessimistic or skeptical camp, I think hopefully you can understand both sides of the argument, right? And, I want you to remember that for the next 4 months as you feel compelled to argue with other Falcon fans that may have a slightly different opinion about it. And that's a reminder to you, to the comment section. I see you guys. Now, you can probably guess, if you're an everydayer of this podcast, you probably know that, my personal opinion leans more towards skepticism, right? I certainly see the path for success, but I feel like it's a narrow one, right? It's a narrow bullseye that this team is going to have to hit in order for this Penix pick to work out. And I joked last week during the draft with someone that, pessimism has never steered me wrong in the 30 plus years that I've been a Falcon fan, right? Like Father Time, pessimism is undefeated when it comes to the Atlanta Falcons. It's the natural state of being, as far as I'm concerned, especially once you've been a fan of this team for as long as I have, right? I think the older everydayers, they don't have a problem when Mr. Drew rears his ugly head, because it's like, that's, Mr. Drew is me. Or I look in the mirror and I see Mr. Drew. But, I want to believe in Raheem, right? He's my guy, right? You listen to that Friday episode after the Falcons fired Arthur Smith, when me and Jarvis were sitting here, trying to put our best sales pitch for Raheem Morris being the next coach of the Atlanta Falcons, And I respect the fact that Raheem has come in sort of talking the talk that you need to talk, right? And the question is going to be whether, when we get to the regular season, is he going to start walking the walk and this team's going to start winning games, right? We've seen other coaches come in here, talk the talk, and haven't really necessarily walked the walk, right? Dan Quinn came in here, revered as his defensive guru. Again, it wasn't true, but people were like, "Oh, he invented the Legion of Boom defense. He gets all the credit for that success, and he's going to build the defense here in Atlanta." No, he didn't. Right? Arthur Smith came in. Oh, he's an offensive guru. Did you see what he did with Brian Tanner? Imagine what he can do with a Hall of Famer like Matt Ryan. He's going to fix him. And, this is going to be a new golden age of Matt Ryan to close out his career for the next 5 years. No, that didn't happen. And, we're hearing Raheem, saying, oh, this team's not going to pick this high again. We know what we're doing. And it's like, okay. Right? Raheem's coming in, this youthful, energetic coach that has figured it out, that's learned from all his mistakes from his previous stint as a head coach. Right? He's figured it all out. He's brought in this stacked coaching staff. Right? They're going to do a great job developing the young talent that Terry and company have already assembled here over the last 3 years in Atlanta, as well as the new talent that they're going to continue to add over the next 3 years in Atlanta, including Michael Penix. And we'll see in a couple of years if that winds up being true. Right? If that winds up living up to the hype that it comes into. Now, I'm hopeful, but at the same time, like Raheem's not saying anything that I haven't heard before from other people, right? I'd be skeptical regardless of who the Falcons hired at coach. If it was Bill Belichick, I'd sit here expressing my skepticism, right? Now, they'd be for different reasons, right? Bill Belichick would come in, oh, I'm changing, right? I can work with Terry. I can work with somebody when I don't have final say over the personnel department. Okay, we'll see, Bill, right? Oh, I can relate to today's players at 72 better than I can relate with today's players at 52. It's like, all right, sure, Bill. We see you, right? So I sit here and I say skepticism is warranted, in my humble opinion, right? You should be skeptical, right? The Falcons have missed the playoffs for 6 years. It's the longest playoff drought they've had since the 1980s. I wasn't even a fan the last time they went 6 years without making the playoffs, between 1983 and 1990. They went 8 years. I didn't become a fan of this football team until after like the 1990 season. But so part of me respects Raheem for sort of taking on this burden, taking on this pressure by talking the talk and saying like, we're going to do this. We're going to do this. Like you got, you're in the position to say that, but I sit here and I go like, what are we doing? I've heard that before, but like at the same time, like, part of that burden is going to be managing the locker room. That was part of my doubt and why the Falcons would take a quarterback to high. Why would a coach invite that into his locker room? That sort of chaos where, you have fans and talk radio and all these people saying, arguing about the quarterback and talking about the quarterback controversy, right? Why would you want to deal with that, right? And you're already kind of dealing with that, right? Kirk's camp's coming out and saying like, they were kind of blindsided by this pick. Now, I think they're all professionals and they'll work itself out, but, we've heard from folks like Jay Gruden and Colt McCoy, who coached Kirk and played with Kirk in Washington over at the Underdog Fantasy. Kirk can be a little sensitive from time to time. All right. Now it becomes easier. Kirk becomes less sensitive, less worried about looking over his shoulder. Raheem is saying he's not going to look over his shoulder, but he becomes less that if the Falcons win, right? And we know Kirk is shooting to get back on the practice field. Does this speed up his timeline? Does this lead to potential setback in his recovery from this Achilles injury? Because he's now eager to get on the field because he don't want to sit here in June, right? His timeline for coming back and practicing before the Falcons break to training camp in the middle of June to July. He wants to get back on the field and show people. He doesn't want to sit here and watch Michael Penix airing it out to Kyle Pitts and whoever else in practice. Who knows, right? But, that's also part of the reason why I kind of think Heineke's chances of sticking are probably a little bit better than people assume, because he can kind of act as a buffer between the Michael Penix and the Kirk Cousins. And, Kirk doesn't have to look behind his shoulder because right behind him is Taylor Heineke on the depth chart, not Michael Penix. We'll see. All right. There's a lot of unknowns here in Atlanta, and it's great for the content here on this illustrious podcast. Right? The everydayers are rejoicing. Like, I don't know what the Falcons are doing, but hey, the content on Locked On Falcons is going to be tremendous. My first listen, my first watch of the day is going to be tremendous this year. Right? And so we're going to be able to talk about a lot of different topics because of so many unknowns over the next 3 months between now and camp. And some of those may be, potentially on tomorrow's episode. We'll see. Some of the free agent options out there to sort of address, to add that firepower on offense and to upgrade the pass rush and secondary. We talked a little bit about yesterday's episode, right? That maybe the Falcons could do in order to elevate them to being much more of a playoff roster than they are currently right there, where they're kind of an also-ran at this point in time. It's like, yeah, they're in the mix, but I don't know if they're clearly the favorite in the division. I know they're the betting favorite at FanDuel, but, Dallas Turner to Latu with the betting favorite for the Falcons draft pick. So, no offense to FanDuel, proud sponsor of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. But, it's not like they're they got Miss Cleo in the back or whatever. They don't, FanDuel is not a profit, unlike me. But we'll see. We'll see. And we'll definitely have some guests later in the week to talk more about Michael Penix in the Falcons draft class. Last thing I'll plug is Locked On Falcons Insiders, right? They are going to get another breakdown of Michael Penix. I did one back in January, breaking down the All-22 from the Washington loss to Michigan in the national championship game. And my plan right now is I'm going to take that behind the Locked On Falcons paywall and give it to you, the people, right, for free. And, that may entice some of you to, this tremendous content that Aaron is producing, and it's behind the paywall. Right. But it's not really. It's 14-day free trial, right? Then pay $4.99 a month. But, that is my plan. By the end of this week, when I do the new breakdown, I'll release the old breakdown for Michael Penix, and that will sort of wet your whistle. And maybe you want to get a little bit more, and then you'll sign up for that 14-day free trial. The link in the description below at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnFalcons. Not only do you get access to all the film breakdowns that I'm going to be doing for the next 3 months about the Falcons draft class, as well as Kirk Cousins, potentially, looking at the commonalities between Kyle Pitts and TJ Hawkinson, and sort of looking at how a Sean McVay derivative offense could feature a tight end like Kevin O'Connell's offense did for those 6 weeks when Justin Jefferson was out, as opposed to anything we've really seen in LA under Sean McVay. So all of that may be in store for you over the next 3 to 4 months if you become a Locked On Falcons insider. So go ahead and hit that link in the description below at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnFalcons. Again, 14-day free trial. You get it free for 2 weeks. So you'll probably get a Penix breakdown. You may potentially get a Rook Aurora breakdown next week for free. And then you can decide, as well as look back at the film breakdowns of, I'm sure some of you may not care about, what I thought about Drake May and Jaden Daniels at this point in time, but you can go look back at that. You can look at the free agent breakdowns I did, where I did talk a little bit about the Pitts Hawkinson parallels, Kirk Cousins and what he's bringing to the table, Darnell Mooney, Rondale Moore, Charlie Warner, Ray McLeod, all that and more. So that is all in store for you guys potentially. So check out the Locked On Falcons insiders at the link in the description below. Hit that subscribe button here on Locked On Falcons so we can get to 10,000. And check out Locked On Sports Today, 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Check on Locked On NFL, Locked On NFL Draft, obviously giving you the fallout of all the draft picks. Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes, also doing the same. It's all there. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every